Welcome to this presentation on optimizing recovery strategies by the Red Bull Salzburg Academy in Austria. It's our pleasure to share this information, and we certainly hope you'll find it useful. Starting off with the key points in our philosophy, firstly, given the complex nature of physical and mental fatigue, we employ a wide range of different interventions, incorporating the entire interdisciplinary team. Secondly, sleep, nutrition and hydration are viewed as the fundamental or non-negotiable elements of this philosophy, and these are complemented by a range of further interventions for certain players and certain situations. Thirdly, rather than a one-size-fits-all approach, we individualize and periodize recovery strategies where possible. And finally, optimizing the implementation or delivery of these strategies is the key to good results. Now, our philosophy of applying multiple interventions with a focus on sleep, nutrition and hydration appears to be largely in line with other professional clubs. As shown here in this table, firstly from a recent survey from Portugal on the left, in which the importance of interventions is ranked, and two further surveys, one from Spain and the other across multiple countries, in which the percentage of teams employing each strategy is shown. For this presentation, we are going to focus on the 6 primary recovery strategies which we employ at our club. We're going to kick things off with sleep and stress management, and then take a look at nutrition and hydration, massage and foam rolling, cold water immersion, compression, and finally active recovery. So first of all, sleep and stress management. Now, we really feel this is one of the most important and fundamental strategies. In terms of the scientific background behind it, some of the key points are that insufficient sleep quality, duration and timing can actually increase injury risk. A history of stresses, stress response and ineffective coping are associated with increased injury occurrence. And we also know that mindfulness is linked to reduced stress, improved coping and reduced injury risk. We try to offer our players a wide range of strategies in relation to sleep and stress management. Ideally, we would like players to be getting 8 or 9 hours of sleep each night. We do 2-week-long sleep assessments with psychoeducative interventions and individual sleep recommendations starting from the under 15 and under 16 teams. We also cooperate with a sleep laboratory for in-depth analysis of sleep problems. Workshops will be held on individual sleep routine, and our sports psychology team can also support players with customized audios. For those players staying in the Academy's boarding facilities, the staff members will employ a number of strategies to facilitate sleep hygiene. These include setting a regular routine for players to be settled in the rooms in the evening and also for lights out, along with managing mobile phone use in the evening, particularly for younger players. In terms of stress, examples of strategies are relaxation audio recordings for post-game use, and these are ideally individualized. Open relaxation classes are offered 3 times a week in the academy, and workshops are held about stress management and individual coping strategies. Also, one-to-one coaching or a daily stress checkup will be used by certain players. We also try to integrate mindfulness. This can be built into individual pre- and post-game training routines, or at a team level, mindfulness interventions and medical staff training in mindfulness and empathic communication. As discussed at the last summit in Doha, it's important when talking about sleep and stress management that we include staff members in the discussion as well. Okay, now moving on to nutrition and hydration, another fundamental part of our recovery strategy. To improve post-exercise recovery in athletes, we recommend the following. Firstly, ensuring a positive energy balance to prevent fatigue and support adaptation processes, and eating several small meals throughout the day, along with intake of calories through fluids. In terms of macronutrients, we know from the literature that it is really important to focus on the quality, the timing and amount of macronutrients. A specific goal is 0.25 to 0.4 grams of protein per kilo body mass after intensive exercise. It's important that these protein portions are evenly distributed throughout the day, in other words 4 or 5 times. A further goal is 1 to 1.5 grams of carbohydrates per kilo an hour in the hours post-exercise, with carbohydrate sources coming from both food and fluids. Consumptions of a recovery drink or snack as soon as possible after a match is important to ensure rapid glycogen resynthesis and also the stimulation of muscle protein synthesis. Another consideration is slow-release protein sources before bedtime. This could be casein or dairy products. And then looking at fluids, we aim for 1 to 1.5 litres of sodium-containing fluid for each kilogram of body mass that's being lost. In terms of concentration here, we're talking about 20 to 50 millimoles per litre in a window of 2 to 4 hours following the exercise. So our approach to nutrition and hydration to optimize the recovery of our players can be encapsulated with the 4 R's: refuel, repair, rehydrate, and recover. On top of this, more individualized recommendations are given in line with the literature. We focus on a whole food perspective, and supplement use such as gels or protein shakes are only used in specific situations when indicated by the team nutritionist or physician. In terms of delivery, we have a 2-phase approach to post-match recovery. In the first 30 minutes, a recovery drink is provided directly in the changing rooms, and then we look to give the players a balanced recovery meal as soon as possible. This could be in the academy after a home game, in the bus, or at home depending on the situation. And this meal might include foods like rice or noodles, salads with chicken, or sandwiches filled with vegetables, lean turkey and cheese. An additional option is also a high-protein nighttime snack such as low-fat dairy muesli or fruit. And this diagram outlines our educational strategy relating to nutrition and hydration. In addition to targeting the players, who are obviously the health beneficiaries of these strategies, we also target staff members like coaches and physiotherapists who support the delivery of these strategies, along with educators at the school or in the boarding facilities, teammates, and also the parents. And the mediums we use range from infographics, practical workshops and presentations through to individual counselling. Next up is massage, which is an extremely popular recovery tool in widespread use in many clubs despite a somewhat limited evidence base. Various potential mechanisms have been proposed for the effects of massage, including biomechanical, psychological, physiological and neurological effects. In relation to delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS, the most commonly proposed mechanisms are an increase in blood flow and a reduction in muscle edema. And in relation to reducing fatigue, the most commonly proposed mechanisms are a reduction in circulating cortisol and an increase in the concentration of beta endorphins. In the literature, there's a number of systematic reviews with meta-analysis. One systematic review published in 2017 included 11 randomized controlled trials and just over 500 subjects. They concluded that massage can significantly decrease DOMS when compared to no intervention. Interestingly, the effects of massage on DOMS was greater at 48 and 72 hours post-exercise than at 24 hours. These authors also concluded that massage can significantly enhance maximal isometric force, but this positive effect was only found at 72 hours, with no significant difference being found when the massage was at 24 hours or 48 hours after exercise. Massage also significantly increased peak torque after strenuous exercise compared to a control group, although this was only apparent for massage at 72 hours after exercise. Finally, 7 articles covering around 250 participants showed that CK levels significantly decreased in the massage group when compared to the control group. The subgroups of 48-hour and 72 hours showed positive effects on CK, but no significant difference was observed in the 24-hour group. A second systematic review and meta-analysis by Dupuy and colleagues in 2018 included 99 studies and investigated the impacts of a single session of different kinds of recovery techniques on DOMS, perceived fatigue, muscle damage markers, and inflammatory markers. And they concluded that massage was the most effective intervention for recovering from DOMS and fatigue, more so than compression or cold water immersion. We should note though that this systematic review only focused on adults. It included both athletic and sedentary populations, and they didn't consider performance outcomes. And then a third systematic review by Poppendijk and colleagues in 2016 included 22 trials and a total of 270 subjects, and this one did focus on performance effects. 5 studies used automated massage, while the other 17 used classical massage. This review found that shorter massages between 5 and 12 minutes had a larger effect than massages lasting over 12 minutes. The effects were also larger for short-term recovery up to 10 minutes than for recovery over 20 minutes. The effects of massage on performance recovery were rather small and partly unclear. Overall, the weighted average performance change due to massage was just over 3%, and the weighted average effect size was 0.19. 13 studies showed only positive effects, although very small, on performance recovery. In 5 studies, positive effects were found for some target parameters, but negative effects were found for others, and the remaining 4 studies found only negative effects. The results suggest that massage duration of 5 to 12 minutes appears to be sufficient to maximize the effect. Massage appears to be of smaller benefit after endurance-type exercise, and larger effects are seen in untrained subjects than in trained athletes. Another strategy in widespread use is foam rolling, either with or without vibration. And like massage, a range of mechanisms have been proposed covering biomechanical, physiological, neurological and psychological effects. 3 of the more recent systematic reviews are summarized here. Firstly, from Alonso Calvete and colleagues just last year, who performed a systematic review and meta-analysis including 10 studies, and they focused on the effect of vibration foam rollers on recovery and performance. They concluded that it has no significant effect on jump performance and isokinetic strength. A second systematic review published in 2019 included 22 studies. These authors reported that the most evidence-based benefit of foam rolling is the alleviation of muscle soreness. 7 of 8 studies assessing pain and soreness resulted in a short-term reduction, and a minimum dose of 90 seconds per muscle appeared beneficial. While 10 of 17 studies looking at range of movement showed acute improvements, the results were inconsistent and highly variable. No significant effect on performance was detected. So the authors concluded that foam rolling for 90 seconds per muscle group may be the minimal duration to achieve a short-term reduction in pain and soreness, with no upper limit being found. And a third systematic review published in 2019 included 14 studies which used pre-rolling, while 7 further studies used post-rolling. Pre-rolling resulted in a small improvement in sprint performance and flexibility, whereas the effect on jump and strength performance was negligible. Post-rolling slightly attenuated exercise-induced decreases in sprint and strength performance. It also reduced muscle pain perception, whereas its effect on jump performance was trivial. Of the 21 studies, 14 used foam rollers, while the other 7 used roller massage bars or sticks. A tendency was found for foam rollers to offer larger effects on the recovery of strength performance than roller massages. The differences in the effect between foam rolling devices in terms of pre-rolling did not seem to be of practical relevance. Overall, it was determined that the effects of foam rolling on performance and recovery are rather minor and partly negligible, but can be relevant in some cases. Evidence seems to justify the widespread use of foam rolling more as a warm-up activity than as a recovery tool. Now moving on to cold water immersion. Cryotherapy is often used after intensive training in various forms. There's also various proposed mechanisms. These include a reduction of muscle damage and the inflammatory reaction, peripheral vasoconstriction and reduced edema formation, a faster reduction of heart rate and cardiac output, and increased parasympathetic activity along with analgesic effects. However, the evidence behind cold water immersion is limited and is often unclear. It does appear that cold water baths and cold chambers are more effective than isolated cool packs, cloths and vests. The results of various meta-analyses are summarized here. The most recent from Moore and colleagues in 2002 included just over 50 studies. They concluded that cold water immersion leads to a reduction in DOMS and improvements in perceived recovery for both eccentric and high-intensity exercise. However, there was no significant influence on the recovery of strength performance, following either eccentric or high intensity exercise. And also, dose-response relationships emerged for several variables, suggesting that lower durations and temperatures may improve the efficacy of cold water immersion if used after high-intensity exercise. And a further systematic review published in 2013 by Poppendiek and colleagues included 21 studies and just over 200 subjects. And this systematic review was focusing on competitive sports. They reported the positive effects of cold water immersion being most evident in sprint performance, and the largest effects being visible 2 to 4 days after the load. Full body immersions were more effective than cooling the extremities, and the water temperature, if it was under 15 degrees, and the total immersion time, if it was longer than 10 minutes, did not seem to play much of a role. And finally, a meta-analysis by Higgins and colleagues in 2017 focused on team sports with 23 studies and just over 600 subjects, and they reported that cold water immersion was beneficial for recovery 72 hours following team sport, and also for neuromuscular recovery at the 24-hour mark. However, cold water immersion was not beneficial for recovering from accumulated sprinting. Another important consideration here is whether we really want to reduce muscle damage or inflammation. Depending on the timing within weekly and season schedules, the effects of cold water immersion can be seen as negative or suppressive in terms of the adaptation process following intensive exercise. In this sense, a periodized approach may be better. So, to put this all together for everyday practice, it certainly appears that whole body immersion is superior to isolated cryotherapy, and that we should start as soon as possible after intensive loads. We follow a protocol of 10 minutes at 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, but some players will take a break in between. We need to remember, as already mentioned, that adaptation processes are potentially inhibited. This might affect the decision of when to use cold water immersion, for example in the preseason, and it is potentially counterproductive between training sessions. And besides recovery considerations, the potential positive effects on acute injuries such as contusions, which are so common after games, needs to be considered. Next up is compression. So many different forms of compression are used, including stockings and other garments, pneumatic compression, and also combined compression with cooling, as with game-ready devices. The proposed mechanisms here are an increase in blood flow and a decrease in tissue oxygen saturation, also an increase in nutrient delivery and metabolite removal. In terms of the evidence base, the most recent review is from Weekly and colleagues in 2021, which is summarized in the diagram shown here. This scoping review included 183 studies, and the authors concluded that the evidence is equivocal whether compression garments improve physical performance. Furthermore, a whole range of measures, such as the rating of perceived exertion, kinematic and kinetic outputs, and cardiorespiratory measures, are likely unchanged with the use of compression. However, some other factors such as muscle oscillation, perceived muscle soreness, and localized skin temperature may be positively affected. And the authors comment that despite evidence suggesting there is little benefit of wearing compression garments, it is unlikely that they harm performance, and they're very convenient. And then a systematic review in 2018 concluded that perceived fatigue can be effectively managed using compression techniques, such as compression garments. Now we should just note that this systematic review only included adults that were over 18. There was also some sedentary participants, and they didn't consider performance outcomes. And finally, a systematic review from Brown and colleagues in 2017 included 23 studies on healthy participants, and they found the largest benefits resulting from compression garments were for strength recovery from 2 to 8 hours and beyond 24 hours. Considering exercise modality, compression most effectively enhanced recovery from resistance exercise, particularly at time points beyond 24 hours. Separate from recovery, another consideration here is injury. If a player has any type of bruising or contusion after a training or match, we'll use compression as part of the injury management, usually in the form of compression stockings, compression combined with cooling, as in game ready, and also pneumatic compression machines. Active recovery is another commonly employed strategy which is lacking in scientific evidence. The proposed mechanisms here are a faster decrease in lactate levels and increased circulation, along with a faster decrease in inflammatory mediators. Active recovery comes in many different forms. It can be jogging or cycling, also light agility drills or mobilization, but in any case submaximal workouts, usually between 5 and 25 minutes, with an intensity of approximately 0.72 RQ. Combined strategies are also often employed. In terms of evidence, there really is a lack of high-quality studies to support active recovery, but generally, from the systematic reviews that we have, we can say that it's potentially effective in the first minutes or hours directly following intensive training or games. And on the positive side, it's a very practical measure which can be universally applied after any type of training, and especially in the preseason, it can be used to develop basic endurance as well. Now, proper application or implementation of recovery strategies is really the key to success. And important aspects here are involving the entire interdisciplinary team in the development of strategies to increase buy-in from all sides, tailoring the approach as opposed to using a one-size-fits-all philosophy, being sure to monitor progress, and then continuously adjusting the strategy as necessary. In terms of monitoring, we primarily focus on subjective wellness markers, but in certain players and certain situations, we also use blood markers and performance tests, including counter movement jumps, isometric hip strength, and eccentric hamstring strength. There are a number of factors which impact implementation of recovery. Perhaps the most important one is the length of recovery window, i.e. the time between training and matches. Whether we're playing at home or away also has a big impact. At home, we're well equipped in terms of facilities and staff to apply recovery strategies, whereas on the road, time is limited, facilities are highly variable, and this leads to some strategies being performed more than others. For example, practical measures like compression garments are easy to apply on a bus or on a plane. Other key implementation factors are staffing, facilities, and equipment. This will vary through the club at different levels, and the number of recovery strategies and the scale of these strategies needs to be tailored to each level to make it realistic. And a final important factor is the phase of training or competition. We need to balance the need for recovery with the need for adaptation. Perhaps the biggest challenge at all with getting recovery performed successfully is the behavior change that's required to bring new practices into the club. And obviously education plays a huge role here, and this needs to be targeted at different levels. We obviously need to educate players who are the ones that directly benefit from recovery, but it's equally important to educate all the staff and parents or tutors in the boarding school that directly work with players. And at a higher level, club managers also play an important role in terms of dictating a policy and the culture within a club. We think that role models are really important, so taking the example of older players in the first team, they can have a really positive effect on the behaviour of younger players in the academy. And we try and establish routines under supervision from a young age, such as in the under 14 and under 15, with the hope that by the time these young players become professionals, the recovery strategies and practices will be well integrated. As an example of how monitoring can be applied, this diagram summarises an approach used in our under 18 academy team during a one-game week, and this approach was also part of a scientific study. Several monitoring tools are included: daily questionnaires, tracking games and trainings, along with CK and CFDNA markers. Also hip adduction and abduction strength and hamstring strength being measured during strength and conditioning sessions on match day -4. Now this scale of monitoring was only possible with additional staff to support the process. Just touching on some of the research projects underway in our club, the monitoring approach from the previous slide was part of a feasibility study within a larger project. This pilot study found that all monitoring measures could be integrated into the daily routine in a time-efficient and minimally invasive manner without influencing the training process. Generally, there was good adherence to this monitoring battery. However, adherence to the questionnaire did drop off towards the end of the study, indicating we need to modify this strategy in the future. An important finding for us in terms of practical application, as illustrated in the diagram here, was that during strength tests like the Nordic hamstring exercise and hip strength tests, the majority of players achieved their best results in the first of 3 reps, suggesting we can reduce the length of screening by performing single repetitions in the future. However, results across repetitions were much more variable for the counter movement jump. Another recent paper from the Red Bull Athlete Performance Center and Partner Universities is shown here, a narrative review of evidence-based recovery strategies which focus really on the practical implementation of each strategy while accounting for different playing levels, facilities, staffing and other contextual factors. And this study includes some nice recommendations as seen in the table here for the example of foam rolling and massage. And the recommendations are divided into different steps based on the financial time and staffing costs involved. So for example, a younger team with less support may focus on education or team-based foam rolling. Older teams with more professional support will be able to offer a more individualized approach, accounting for different player preferences. Another preliminary study in our academy investigated the sleep-wake behavior of just over 100 academy football and ice hockey players. This study showed how athletes' sleep duration and latency is impacted by the weekly schedule. And this is being used as the basis for further studies in collaboration with Salzburg and Leipzig universities. And finally, a publication that I think you all know from Warren Gregson and Robin Thorpe from Red Bull's Athlete Performance Center in Los Angeles. This paper really nicely outlines how different recovery strategies can be periodized to reflect the demands of the training and match schedule in order to adequately recover, but also consider the need for an adaptive response. And this paper also provides a great summary of the current literature on different recovery strategies. So to finish off, here's just a summary of the 6 main strategies we employ for recovery, along with the recommendations that we follow. I hope you found this presentation useful. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and bye for now.